Wild salmon. Who needs them? Do we really need them? Could we get by with hatchery fish? We couldn't, actually, as it turns out. Wild salmon are central to our economies, our culture, and they're a keystone species in our environment. They're absolutely crucial. I'm Barry Wilson. I'm a systems ecologist, and it's my mission to help people and organizations unlock economic prosperity, which right now in many cases seems to be getting locked up, while at the same time sustaining the earth that nourishes us. So right now we tend to get into real conflicts over individual sectors or priorities, say like salmon, protecting salmon, versus fishing salmon and having the jobs of those and looking at them independently. But the reality is that the salmon are part of a really complex but critical system on the planet. Did you know that here on the Pacific Northwest where I live out in British Columbia, Canada, but up and down the Pacific Northwest, this is a multi-billion-dollar economy, salmon fishing. It's incredible. It's tens of thousands of jobs rely on having salmon. What would happen if we lost them? Is it important to keep our salmon stocks around? I guess so, right? Multi-billion-dollar industry, tens of thousands of jobs, not to mention the cultural aspects, the importance of teaching systems to people through watching salmon who participate and engage and sustain these amazing, complex, huge systems that go from way inland on the continent to way out into the open ocean. It's incredible. Did you know that we often think of salmon as being a water species, right? They're in the ocean, they're in the rivers, but really they are a forest creature just as much. Did you know that 137 different species rely on the nutrients that are provided by salmon, whether they're in the ocean or in the rivers? In fact, the forests are so critically dependent on the nutrients that salmon provide. It's actually amazing. They did a study in Alaska and found that 25% of the nitrogen in the foliage, in the leaves of the trees in the forest that are sucking up carbon and producing clean drinking water, 25% of the nitrogen in those leaves came from the sockeye salmon run. Isn't that incredible? All of those nutrients, the nitrogen that's providing the critical nutrients for that forest to grow and thrive, that does so many other valuable things beyond just being there. 25% of it is coming from the salmon when they return home to spawn. It's incredible. So the reason I wanted to talk about this is the fact that salmon are in trouble. In Canada right now, the Minister of Natural Resources is actually considering putting steelhead salmon as a species at risk. Many species are endangered. We're trying to offset that with fishery or hatchery salmon, but that's just sort of a short-term stopgap measure. Hatchery fish do not have the genetic diversity that are going to be able to sustain and recover our wild stocks, which is how we're going to get out of this spot where we are right now, which is incredibly low numbers of salmon. If we want to unlock the economic potential of salmon, what we need to do is take care of our wild stocks. So the reality is, it seems like existing management strategies aren't working. If they were, we wouldn't be looking at listing species on the species at risk list or putting them in as endangered. Or in parts of California where I was visiting with Cal Salmon folks a couple of years ago, where we're spending millions and millions of dollars to try to recover thousands of fish. If everything was working, we wouldn't have to be doing all of this stuff. So it's not working, and if you just keep trying the same approach over and over again, should you expect something different to happen? Probably not. I think Einstein had a term for that. So I'm actually involved in a process where we're taking a new, fresh look. We're we're working with Indigenous people and Western scientists. We're bringing together those two sets of knowledge, and we're thinking about the issues around salmon populations a little bit differently. Instead of digging in on individual predictions of numbers and escapement and the real finest level of detail, what we're actually doing is taking a step back and we're looking at the system. And the system for salmon is the whole area, the geographic boundary of their habitat, which extends well inland into the continent, up into mountain streams, and well out into the ocean. It's massive, massive area. So, but that's actually the scale that the system works at. So we're taking a fresh approach and we're looking at big things like the big blob out in the Pacific Ocean and that water, that warm water and how it's moving around, and also looking at water temperature within rivers and streams and how that might be changing, how it is changing with climate change. We're looking at sort of understanding what are the big levers. Is it sediment? Is it suntan lotion from people tubing down rivers in spawning channels? What are the big drivers? Is it mortality from commercial fishing out in the ocean, in the rivers, a combination? Is it toxicity? A number of those issues we're looking at. And so I got to participate in a workshop yesterday that was really being led by Dr. Michael Sullivan, and he's working with us to develop an approach that he calls geomodeling that they've pioneered in the province of Alberta with another migratory fish, which is bull trout. And it's working exceptionally well. Department of Fisheries and Oceans really likes the approach, and they've said, hey, this works great for fish, it works great for whales. We're going to be using this approach more and more and more. So it's really cool. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about it in more details about how we're doing that. But basically, we're looking into the system. And for salmon, we're looking at one population unit. The one we're focusing on right now is the Adams Lake sockeye population. That's a World Heritage salmon run. And we're sort of looking at three big categories of factors, risks or threats, I guess, to the population. One is their habitat. Two is invasive species, and we throw in hatchery fish as an invasive species because they're not natural and they're taking up part of the food web, part of the space out there, part of the carrying capacity. They're actually competing with our wild stocks. And so habitat, invasive species, and then the third, and maybe this is one of the biggest ones, is mortality and the sources of that mortality. Big ones being commercial fishing. So anyway, if you want to learn how to do this, this is an exciting opportunity. Dr. Michael Sullivan has done this for many watersheds in Alberta, helping influence migratory fish policy. Now he's working a little bit with us here in British Columbia, and we're starting to maybe adapt this, working with the Pacific Salmon Foundation, the BC Ministry of Environment, the Adams Lake Indian Band and Squamish Nations, perhaps partnering with other Indigenous groups like the Upper Nicola or the Tanaha. I can see that happening absolutely because the territories are very close. If you want to see how this is working, Dr. Sullivan is actually going to be giving a presentation on how to do this, how to do dose response geomodeling at the upcoming CE Analytic Cumulative Effects Conference in Kamloops, May 22nd and 23rd. If you want information on that, go to cfxconference, all one word, .com, and you can get all the information there. You can also sign up for a little mail list there, and we'll send you information on the conference as new stuff comes along. And you can register and buy your tickets right there online. If you're part of an Indigenous community, there is a 25% discount. So go check that out. Take this opportunity to work with a really innovative and leading edge scientist. Be in the room, talk to other people who are interested and care about salmon, both for the environmental benefits that we get, but also to unlock our economy.